Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Cheryl Selman, and welcome to The Love Code. Thanks for joining me. I'm always thrilled to have you listening in, taking part in this conversation, because The Love Code is all about upliftment. It's about transformation. It's about healing. It's about opening your heart and tapping into the infinite potential that we have within us. And when we have these conversations, they always seem to have such a power to open us up, to elevate us, to shift our focus and consciousness so we can live in our life in a more connected way. And my intention is so that you can be more in a place of peace and love as you go through your day, as you go through your week, and as you share with other people. So that's my intention for the show. And as always, I have great conversations and wonderful guests. And today I have another really inspiring guest. And we're going to be talking about God Has Infinite Frequency with my guest, John Masters. And I just want to share a little bit about him. Jonathan Masters developed a lifelong quest to understand the nature of life and the universe. The markers of his inward journey include learning and teaching meditation under the guidance of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Writing God Has Infinite Frequency Aphorisms for a Fractured Age is his way of sharing his inner light and expanding awareness. If you are curious about where his journey began, and he likes to say his more traditional journey and more traditional roles, he's also a husband, a father, an entrepreneur, an inventor, an amateur musician, and a professional consultant. And his most recent and beautiful book, it's an inspirational book, it's a piece of art as well, is called God Has Infinite Frequency. And we're talking to Jonathan Masters all the way from Switzerland. So it's my pleasure to welcome Jonathan to the show. Hello and welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. One of my dear friends who has another radio show had you on, and she always shares the people who inspire her the most. So that's how I found you, and she just thought you were just wonderful and that you would be great on the show. So I always trust her opinion, and I just jump in. And I have to say, it's just learning a little bit about you and looking at this beautiful book that you've created along with several other artists. You've created an experience. You've created an experience. Your book is an experience. So let's talk about your journey, Jonathan, because I don't know much about your journey, but we're all about to find out. I'm sure it's really a fascinating story, and it's always a healing story to learn how people journey through their lives and arrive at that sense of purpose and passion and that spiritual dynamic. So tell us about your journey.
Well, thank you. I want to provide a context here about the book. Has a title and a subtitle, right? So the title is God Has Infinite Frequency. But the subtitle is also important, Aphorisms for Our Fractured Age. And I think that's our context in a way. Many people are feeling and experiencing inward and outward fractures. There's so many polarities that we're experiencing right now. And in a way, that can be a horrible experience, but in a way, of course, ultimately, it can be a transformational experience. It is a transformational experience, I suppose. And the direction of that transformation, I think we have some control over. But back to, in me, in a sense that, there was 2 or 3 major things that happened in my life, which I think added to my sort of awareness, right? One of them you mentioned, which is that I learned to meditate and I became a teacher of the Transcendental Meditation technique. and participated in those programs. And that gave me a grounding in just an inward silence. But there's two other very, very important things for me also, and one of which is a journey with what I broadly term the right use of will books. So there's a series of books that were channeled by C.N. Rowan, which in a way were inspiration for this book because they're experiential. You read these books and it's not about reading, it's about what happens. It's about the vibrational experience that you have and the healing that ensues. And then I also worked with several people, but one or two in particular, around healing and bringing in more cosmic awareness, and I had some amazing experiences. And so along these journeys, I would be also, as you mentioned, sort of going through the world and doing professional this, that, and another thing, and having a family. And I would just see things sometimes. It would be like aha. It would be like this reflective, like aha experience, like just like seeing the nugget of something. So I began to write all this stuff down over many years. And at one point I felt like, oh, this can be a book. This would be wonderful because I'd love to share these with other people. And through a process of refinement and then also connecting them with art was very important, as you mentioned. The two artists in the book are just amazing. They're very different, but each of them has their own incredible contribution. One of them was an Iowa-based artist, although she did a lot of showing around the Midwest, and someone who I knew personally. And the way she uses color, and it's just, when you say frequency and these colors and how they work together, it's amazing. And the other artist was Swedish, but living and working in D.C., and she's just amazing with her. She's more of a sort of social activist and stuff, and so her work is more representational, and so it works very, very well with some of the aphorisms about sort of looking at particular issues that we have and understanding the spiritual insight that you can gain out of them.
So it's a collaborative work, and you bring in the inspirational words. They bring in the creative expression through their artwork. And I'd like us to talk about this title that you have, God as Infinite Frequency. That's an interesting title, Jonathan. What is that title all about?
I'll tell you where it came from visually. Like for me, like one time I was thinking about if you had a tennis ball and just like thinking of it going between two walls, going back and forth and back and forth. And you could see it bouncing off one wall and bouncing off the other wall. And if it went fast enough, it would be a blur. You couldn't see it. You would just see like this blur. Now, it turns out that if it actually went fast enough, if it was infinitely fast, it would not only, you couldn't see it, but it would be located in all places. And that's the thing, that's the idea, concept behind. If something has infinite frequency, it's actually at all places at all times. And that's, we say God has infinite frequency because God exists in all places and at all times. And the first aphorism in the book, the book's title comes from the first aphorism, which is God has infinite frequency. But in each entry in the book, there's also some commentary. And I want to just read that commentary for you. And it's also framed in a beautiful photograph of a particular flower that's found in Switzerland. God has infinite frequency. She is everywhere at once, at every time at once. At each point in time, God's truth is the highest, most complete truth available. At the next point in time, that is again true. God is timeless and reborn each moment. So for some people, this would be a comforting understanding. For some people, this would be a revolutionary understanding. And the understanding of God, I think whoever has any concept of God, no matter what that concept is, that concept forms a kind of foundational belief for them. It's a foundation. God is the ultimate for them. That's what we mean by God. God, whatever it is, he is, she is, whatever it is the ultimate. And that person's kind of concept of life and that person's belief system. And so if you began to kind of shake or transform that fundamental belief system, that foundational belief system, then everything else will begin to change also. And that's kind of the access point of this book. Each of the aphorisms, I would say almost all of them, are looking at some fundamental belief, some fundamental thing. A lot of it's unconscious that we have, that we're walking around with, that frame how we see and experience the world. But as you begin to transform those fundamental beliefs, then things can open up. You begin to see the world in different ways. In this particular case, you would understand that God is that life, God, consciousness is a recreative experience, that it's new at every moment in time, and that it doesn't mean that old truths are not true. It just means that it's constantly regenerating. And if you understand that, and if you can live that, you're going to live a very, very different life than if you're thinking that things are fixed and nothing's going to change and just, it is the way it is kind of thing.
And I think the greatest strength for those who are on a spiritual path, you might say, it's this belief that our frequency is changing as we change through changing our environment, through changing our diet, through bringing in more peace, through meditation, through so many things, spending more time in nature. It's going to change our frequency. It's going to change our energy field. We're going to vibrate in a new way. And that always will alter our perception of what is. And isn't that the name of the game? To continue to expand the perception of what is, right? If that makes sense to you.
I would say that is a symptom or a result. And that the core thing that's changing is our understanding and incarnation of ourselves. And that it has to start with ourselves. It has to start within. It has to start with the strength and the power and the manifestation, meaning incarnation of who we are, what we are, how we understand ourselves. And a lot of the aphorisms in the book it's all about pointing inward. It's about starting with oneself, starting with the silence, and understanding that oneself is ultimately not our, house or clothes or hair color or eye color or whatever, or our personality or whatever. It is some deeper sense of truth.
So let's talk about this concept of a fractured age. What do you mean by that subtitle?
Well, I mean that I would say on so many different levels. Right? It's just about, it seems like everything. I mean, the most obvious and outward thing is our political, at least in the United States, and well, it's not just in the United States, of course. It's in every country has their own thing, and then in the world there's this thing. There's just people on different sides. There's people that are feeling not anything about what's common, but what's different. They're demonizing each other. And this is a fractured situation. And, but I believe that comes from, again, an internal fractionation, you could say. And I'm going to bring in another very big concept here. And this concept really derives from this teaching of the right use of will. But I'm going to read another, if I can find it quickly here, another aphorism here. And what it says is, the most powerful social action we can take is to call back home our lost or rejected parts. The most powerful social action means, like protest, external, trying to change the external. But the most powerful thing we can do is to start at home. Because what you're seeing on the outside, you think it's outside. It is not. It is not. It is inside. And what's happening now is that parts of us, and this is the commentary, are out there creating chaos and destruction. You think it's some other person, but if you feel, and the key to all of this stuff is feeling what it feels like inside for you, feeling how that external destruction is feeling, the horror, the dismay, the pleasure, whatever you're feeling about it. And through that process of feeling and integrating is where that wholeness is going to come from, and where that external reflection will actually change. So what it says is, we have all felt conflicted within ourselves about how we feel, how we want to act, about who we are. Remember the times you denied you were afraid? Oh, I can't be afraid. I'm too macho and cool for that. You know what I mean? Or stuffed your rage, or pretended that our feelings don't matter. Maybe you experienced the result of these denials internally: confusion, chaos, and pain. But there are also times that we do not remember. And what we see in the world right now is our denied rage and terror being acted out by disconnected parts of ourselves. What we see right now in the world is our denied rage and terror being acted out by disconnected parts of ourselves. Some parts are in other bodies or on other planes. It does not matter. It is time to consciously call all those parts home. They have a story to tell, and they are ready to listen. They are ready to be heard. So this ground of consciousness, bringing wholeness together, is also a state of evolution that is ready to happen. That's what I'm saying. These parts, they're a source of strength and wholeness for us. Sometimes they are the teacher. Sometimes the young children wanting, needing desperately to come home, as they've been out, away for so long, lost. With clear intent and feeling all the way along, you can be reunited. And it just ends again. Social justice depends on internal wholeness and balance.
Well, I have so many thoughts from what you just read, and I want to just share. I want to start off with a conversation I recently had for one of my other shows, an interview with a guest who had a diagnosis of Lyme disease. He almost died from Lyme disease. He had such a chronic condition. For 10 years, he suffered with Lyme disease. And when he was telling his story, he was pretty much at the end of his tether and came close to death from Lyme disease and hospitalized and just had all sorts of debilitating symptoms occur in his body. And he decided he was just going to go out into the desert and just face what's going on and heal what's really going on behind this debilitating disease that he had. So he spent, he said it was the sixth day that he was out in the desert by himself. And he was filled with immense panic attacks. It was overwhelming, this fear. Part of it is from Lyme. Part of it is just his own fear. Probably all of it was his own fear in the end. And he just had this, overwhelming fear and panic. And he really was looking at this and looking at his disease and this bacteria that he thought had, taken his life. And he something shifted inside him, and he began to have compassion for this form of life, right? Called a Borrelia. You can call it bacteria, but it's life. It's part of the infinite frequency. And he entered a state where he honored and opened his heart to that part of creation. And he said he felt this overwhelming sense of compassion. And it was a profound experience. After that, he said he was healed of his Lyme disease. But in that journey, to get to that place, he said, he needed to dive deep into all the suppressed emotions that he had, unresolved anger towards his father, memories he didn't even, really existed early in life of hurts and wounds, whatever that was. And he had to dig deep and create opportunities to discover what was the dark side, the unresolved side within him that was manifesting as this enemy of his body, right? And it was the most inspirational story, because after doing all this inner work and outer work, and then the culmination of arriving to this profound moment, which wasn't a thought, it wasn't, I would say it was a true spiritual transformative moment of opening his heart and seeing that this thing that he hated was all part of the one. And that was a moment that he healed his Lyme, never had it again.
It's a beautiful story. Thank you.
But it was very inspirational, and it just sounds, just fit into what we were talking about, because it's a journey. It's, you can't intellectualize healing the wounded parts of us. You have to dive into the pain and into the inner world to understand what we're even talking about.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And, in a way, Maharishi articulated this in the broadest sense, which is that if you take these different polarities in life, and this could be what we consider fractures right now, or just the normal polarities, male, female, black, white, up, down. What are the two most extreme polarities in experience as one grows? And those two are silence and activity. The silence of consciousness, the beingness, and the phenomenology of the ever-changing world. And those are the two irreconcilably different experiences. How can one be absolute, beyond manifestation, silent, full, but non-manifest? How can one be that and at the same time be in a changing, ever-changing, colorful, loud, up-down world that we're going through all the time? The two experiences are irreconcilably different. But there is only one thing that can pull them together, that can make them one. And that is the expansion of the heart, of love, of the ability. It's only the heart that in which these two polarities can simultaneously exist and be understood and lived as one. And as that experience grows within us, it actually changes our state of consciousness. And that state is a higher state of consciousness from, he articulated different levels of consciousness. But anyway, this is an important part of what's happening, and it's exactly what you said. It's you go in. It's a feeling. It's a comprehending that everything is part of one through an experience of expansion of heart, of love, of acceptance, of seeing the whole.
So, Jonathan, these are inspirational words or inspirational truths of great wisdom, but I'm very Taurian. So what are some practical steps or tools that are really required to navigate through this time of change, of our, everything is changing, and it's very scary. And when you jump into the unknown, it's always a fearful place, because you can't, you don't control anything anymore. So we need tools, and we need ways to access that inner guide to help us through, not only to help us through, but to really help us understand the opportunity to deepen our spiritual awareness. So what are some of your words of wisdom? How can, for people listening and they go, look, this I really want this. It resonates with me. I don't have it. What do I need to do? What would you advise and guide people to do on their path?
Thank you. So I am offering a pure incarnation of a vibration that has been through, fire and transformation of its own. And this is this book, God Has Infinite Frequency, Aphorisms for Our Fractured Age. And this, to me, and through, like I said, a lot of deep experience and a lot of action to make it the way it is what I'm offering right now as access point for this. It vibrates that. It is that vibration. And I've been, as a person here, I made this thing. It felt great to me, and I didn't really know how other people would respond. Everyone has a different path, so I don't really know what's right for any particular person. But what I've found is that people are responding to this in amazing ways. They just say, wow, this really, I can feel this. I take one a day, and I just, use that as my theme for the day. And I just allow myself, I sit with it. I allow myself to feel it, to go into it. And as you said, the whole thing about the artwork is it's kind of like right brain, left brain, right? How we perceive and understand the world is through, we have a right side and a left side. One's more male, one's more female, one's more analytic, one's more sort of intuitive. But both together are stimulated, I would say, by the aphorisms and the phrases in this book. And so that is what, that's kind of my offering at this point for people to access that.
So what you're saying is that the book carries a frequency. It is a frequency, and it is an intentional frequency, and it's the frequency that you were inspired by. You got the creative inspiration to put this together to make it happen, and that just going through, because each page is, is a meditation in itself. It's a visual meditation because the paintings are all pretty amazing. But then there's these statements, these truthful statements that are something worth pondering throughout your day. And that is that's a portal, right? That's a portal to a different state of consciousness if people choose to use it in that way.
It is a portal. It was my honor to be a creator of this book, but I really feel I was a co-creator. Yes, it's my book, but I was, it's sort of like I said somewhere in it, it's like it's mine, but it's not mine. It really feels like it has its own life, and it's not only the art, but just how the whole created process was. It was, something that seemed beyond my individuality.
Art, whatever form it's in, whether it's a visual artist or with poetry or words, is fascinating process to me, because it's like you are a transducer of a frequency into a form, right?
I like that.
Tune into something. You're inspired. You like that?
I'm going to use that.
Well, that's good. Carry it on. But you know what I mean? It's like we just have an impulse. There's an impulse, and we become the vehicle that manifests it into some form, and then can share it. And it carries a frequency. If people just look at some of the photos, they can alter our brain. You can alter our perception. Right. You can alter, many frequencies. Because this concept of frequency is so interesting to me, Jonathan. I work with a lot of frequency technologies for healing, and amazing technologies that are operating in this world of energy and frequency and information, which is becoming more common now. We hear it much more frequently than we used to in many ways, in many forms. But for me, it's also very true in the healing arts. We're talking more about frequencies, and the technologies that I've been working with, which I can use these technologies and work with frequencies, balancing frequencies or harmonizing frequencies to people anywhere in the world, right? It's no longer having to be in my office. We now understand, I guess it's in our understanding, and then it manifests in the form, right, that we are able to vibrate frequencies into the field. And when you understand this, then everything becomes a frequency that can be vibrated into the field. You can put the word love on a jug of water, and you are vibrating a frequency of love into the water that also is a carrier of frequency that you drink, and you're getting that frequency as well.
Interesting. Yeah. I think there's some...
Isn't it?
When I hear this, I feel like, wow, there's just so much we don't really understand.
Well, that's wonderful, because there's more to learn. There's more expansion, more wonder, more wonder for us. Yeah, and I think this is where meditation is really important. So you've been a teacher of meditation. You've been very involved with the Maharishi Yoga Center. Talk to us about the importance and the role of meditation at this point in time. Or maybe it's always been an important thing for us at any time.
I want to expand, take that one step further, actually, if you don't mind. I want to talk to a new concept I'm calling new. I'm coining it in a sense, called spiritual health. So it's not so new, but I think we haven't focused on it. We know about physical health. We have an understanding of that and what that is. We talk about emotional health, psychological health, mental health. And, of course, mental health is more abstract than physical health. I mean, how do we deal with that? It's just more abstract. And one level beyond that is I want to call spiritual health. And I think we need to have to bring that into the conversation, the worldwide conversation of what it means to be healthy, is that that we need a concept called spiritual health. And I don't have the end all and be all about what that even is, but I have some sense of it. And it's parallel to your question about like meditation, because what does it mean to be spiritually healthy, right? It means that, for me anyway, that one has access to an internal state of peace, that from within ourselves we are not polarized in that sense, that there's a unifying creative silence within us. And that forms that spiritual health, that spiritual connection to the divine within us, forms the basis for the rest of our life and for the rest of our health. Like the guy with Lyme disease, he sort of got connected on a more fundamental level and was able to experience healing on the external as well. So I feel like that's an important thing for us to begin to ponder and understand, because right now we're sort of wired with patterns and what I call samskaras from our past lives, from our present life, whatever. It's just, things like, the simple example would be something like, you go to an intersection when you're little and some car comes and you're scared and your mom is like, oh, get out of the way. And then now, many years later, still every time you come to an intersection, you're like, oh, you have this fear. And that's a kind of samskara pattern. And it's not that it's different than learning that when you go to an intersection, you got to look both ways. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about some deeper kind of wounding that occurs, that somehow you're fundamentally not okay, and that this situation could harm you, that you're not, that you're it's beyond your capability to deal with. So we go through life with many of these conscious and mostly unconscious kind of limiting patterns. And I think that through meditation, through this book, through good, like what you said, other good health things, you can giving yourself time to feel and go inward, that these things can be first become conscious and then be healed. And it's very important for how our quality of life.
Absolutely, and it just reminds me of a quote, which I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but the essence of a quote that I read that really resonated with me is that we're distracted by the outer world. So our busyness keeps us from knowing who we are. And by being quiet, by reflecting, by, whether it's meditation or whether it's spending a week in the desert by yourself, or whether it's walking through, nature, it just lets us be drawn back into the self, because that's the real connection. That's the place where real healing happens. And I think that, to me, is one of the gifts of any type of meditative practice. It just brings us back into the quietness within us, rather than the externalized busyness that is really just projections of our thoughts and our fears. Right. So
exactly.
Having quiet
thing
time.
About fears. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, before we went on, what you said there is key. It's the busyness. We think, oh, I'm busy, whatever. But actually, it's about avoiding feelings and fear and others. And really, the key is around feeling what's going on, feeling yourself.
Right. And you have to slow down to do that. You have to be more reflective. You have to breathe more, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be mindful. You have to slow your eating. You have to spend time and watch the flowers grow. Whatever. Whatever.
Right.
We create those spaces wherever we are. But when you really want more peace in your life, when you want to have healing in your life, whether you are dealing with a physical challenge or an emotional challenge, and people are wanting to get out of the pain, they have to slow down. They have to stop their busy external world and investigate, explore that inner world, because that is where answers are found.
Right. That's where healing is found, because it's these feelings which are integrated. It's these aspects of ourselves which have been fragmented internally, and as I said before, some of them actually externally. I've gone through several processes of integrating parts of myself which were not in my body, which were either in other bodies or coming from other planes. And this is a very important experience. And this will come only through that access point of going in and feeling it, and using your mind also and consciousness to kind of have the intent. With clarity of intent is important. What is your intent?
So I'm wondering, Jonathan, if you would be willing to share an experience where you had that kind of insight and healing.
Oh yeah. Yes, I will.
Thank you.
I'm going to think of. I wasn't prepared for this question, so
I'm sure you have many to choose from.
Yes. I'm going to say two different ones, which are very different. And the first one is I became aware, and I was doing healing work, but I became aware of some aspect of myself that was in a little girl. I was in the U.S., actually, it was in Iowa at the time. A little girl, and maybe she was 9 or 10 or 11 years old, in Italy. And she was very, 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 very unhappy. She wanted to come home. And she knows she wasn't at home in a fundamental spiritual sense. And so she actually committed suicide. But in doing that, she was brought home, and she was part of me. And I welcomed her with compassion and love and openness and understanding. And in that healing, for both of us, there was a reunion. There was a relaxation, a kind of like a piece of me was all of a sudden there and put in place where it needed to be. And her, that essence, that part of her that was, me, was also feeling, of course, finally at home and finally at peace.
Wow.
So this experience was, and you can't, it's beyond one's comprehension that from a normal perspective, like, wow, what was that? But the other one, I want to say that I was kind of taken on a journey, on a ride. All of a sudden, I was able to kind of move through the universe in a different way, like just through thought. I was able to like go through expand different places. Anyway, through that whole thing, I came to this vision, this place call it a place, call it a vision, call it whatever, I don't know. But it had a name, it has a name. It turns out to be an experience that is recorded in the Vedic history called Hiranyagarbha. And Hiranyagarbha is roughly translated as the golden egg of the universe. And it was this essential, primal experience of love and existence. It was this golden egg. It was like a zillion stars, but it had a golden glow, and it was kind of oval shaped, whatever. And the information came at that time also that this experience was eternal. It was there. It's always been there. And the information also was that there's part of us, I guess you could say, that is not manifest. It never has been manifested and never will manifest. It's this underlying Hiranyagarbha, this experience of universal love that exists within consciousness.
Well, what an amazing gift you received to enter that state of consciousness, or I would say to access that frequency.
Yes, thank you. It was quite a gift. It was amazing.
And Jonathan, was that as a result of meditation practices that you were doing?
You know, causality is tricky. You can quote me on that. Causality is tricky.
Is there one thing that does it? Gotcha.
I would say it was the result of everything. So it's hard to. Yeah, there were circumstances around.
I would say you prepared yourself for a long, long time, maybe longer than we realize, and then you were ripe, and that moment arrived.
Exactly.
How does that sound?
That sounds correct.
And then it popped, and you popped into another frequency. Yeah. How beautiful. What a gift, to tap into other states of consciousness and other realms. It's pretty amazing. One of my guests who lives in Japan, she's American, but Japanese, and then she had an awakening. She had an awakening. She went to a spiritual workshop. She had an awakening. I guess you might say she opened up her third eye. And she told the story on one of the podcast interviews where she could start seeing things that were there that she couldn't see in her previous state of consciousness. But when her third eye was open, she saw other things and other dimensions. And one of the things that she saw, being Japanese and being a part of that culture, she actually saw dragons. She saw dragons. She said she was flying in an airplane one time and looked outside the window, and there was a dragon flying alongside her. But, it wasn't like she was hallucinating. She was entering another frequency where these other beings exist. And they exist, and that's part of the Japanese spiritual culture, so she culturally connected to that. It was an amazing, story she was sharing because it was so out of her normal state of consciousness. And when she opened up to that ability, she could see things that others had, culturally had been recorded throughout time, but everyone thought it was just a mythological being. But she said, no, it isn't. It actually does exist as a spiritual frequency. Pretty interesting.
Right. Wow.
I think.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Or just like you going to that Vedic place of, eternity, immortality of love, that, wow, just makes you want to go in and read your book and tune in to these frequencies, Jonathan. It's a good advertisement for your book. I mean, if why not? Anything can be that moment that we prepared for when we just find ourselves popping into that other, frequency. Right?
Right. Yes. Like I said,
that's why I find people's stories. Yes, causality is tricky. I mean, people's stories are very inspiring because each of us, our lives are a creative work of art, as I see it. Our lives, not one person on this planet has the same experience in life. So we're all unique pieces of creative, manifestation. And I find that so fascinating. And I love hearing people's journeys because everyone has their own unique creative expression of how they are learning and healing in this lifetime. Everyone's doing it differently. And it's pretty interesting. I just like,
Yes, and the more kind of relaxed and holistic we are and we become, the more we can be creative, and the more that we, there's another, I want to, maybe getting towards the end, I want to quote one more thing, which is that, I want to find the right one first, though. Basically, that right now is just the beginning, that we don't really understand the differences that we have because we don't have the unity yet. And yes, here it is. So this is another quote here. It says that once we experience our unity, our differences are no longer a threat. And this is important because right now differences are threatening. But that's because there's no basis. There's no foundation. We're not in unity. Unified, we can safely express ourselves. And if you think we are different now, there are many souls and many aspects of souls that have yet to manifest due to judgments and misunderstandings. What do you think all those bar scenes in Star Wars have been preparing us for?
Right. There are more aliens out there than the aliens we meet down the street.
Yes. We're incredibly, so we have just what you said, very, we're different artists. We're going to paint different things, create different works of art and all that. But it needs to be based on this kind of a connection with wholeness within.
Yeah, and according to many great spiritual teachers, wisdom of astrology, there's some Vedic scholars on, everyone is saying the same thing, essentially, and that is that we are living at a moment of profound transformation and have a potential to access these other states of consciousness, to access other frequencies, if we want to call them that, where we can realize the great power that we have, that great heart, that great love that is the love of the universe. That this is a moment when, it's sometimes pressure is what's required to bring that into being. But if that is our focus and that is our intention, and if we surround ourselves with those frequencies through your book, through music, through nature, however you do it, it's feeding that energy that is available, that's this moment in time. Makes possibilities happen.
Right.
So, Jonathan, any last words of wisdom before we have to bring this inspiring conversation to its conclusion?
Thank you very much. I very much enjoyed our conversation. And GodHasInfiniteFrequency.com if you're interested in more information on me and the book and whatever.
Is it .com or .org?
Either one, actually.
Okay, because I want to be sure that people know where to go. So it's the website is GodHasInfiniteFrequency.com or .org.
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
I don't want
because people can look at.
Story.
Go ahead. No, we want people to go to the right place.
I was just saying, I don't have to do .org, .com, whatever. But yes, it's GodHasInfiniteFrequency.org.
Okay. Because you have some of this beautiful artwork and these aphorisms there as well, so people can get a taste of them. And your book is a beautiful gift for people, for themselves or for others. This is the kind of inspiration that we are needing very much now. So I want to thank you for that frequency, Jonathan, that brought this into being, that brought your beautiful book and the inspiration that it holds into being. And just thank you for that dedication to the journey and the path of service that you're on.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So now we've come to the end of another wonderful, timeless conversation. I want to thank Jonathan Masters for being with us today. I want to thank all of my listeners for being with us today. And I trust that these conversations continue to tap into that knowingness inside you and opening your heart to the love that you are. And as I always like to say in the show, may you be filled with love, peace, and harmony this week. Bye for now.
Amen.